Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everybody. Okay, again, this is one of those episodes where I just got to watching a ton of stuff, listening to a bunch of stuff, looking up a bunch of stuff, and I thought, Sean, you got to record, or else, you're never going to get this done and get this out. So the learning never stops, ladies and gentlemen, nor should it. Okay, first of all, I will start here. I've put up a new Substack article. I made reference to these videos, I want to say maybe a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, from Sabrina Wallace, who again has a Odyssey channel. P Synergy, I believe, is her actual channel. But either way, bounce over to the americanclassroom.substack.com and you'll see the article. It's a very quick article. And then, of course, her two specific videos, I should say, where she is discussing our digital twin and what that means, all of the patents that are associated with it. And again, I'm paraphrasing here as briefly as I can because it's rather complex, but it is the combination of human beings and robots utilizing wireless technology and weaponizing all of it, of course, for the purposes of hurting us and killing us, if not downright controlling us to that very fateful end, so to speak. Again, I highly recommend that this audience watch those videos. They are overwhelming. She's very quick, but she's also, again, connecting these dots that are right next to each other. And all of this information is widely available on the internet. And you see her screen as she's talking, and she's bouncing around from website to website. She's showing you the white papers on all of this. She's showing you the patent numbers. This is a very real thing, and it is not new. This is something that has been around for many, many, many years. This has been the gradual progression of technology within our lives, of course, not to mention even school environments. In fact, she has another video out that I'm currently watching where she's specifically talking about this relating to students. So I'll bring you that particular video and some of the updates on that video, and certainly my take on that probably on Friday. But either way, the article on the americanclassroom.substack.com is Your Digital Twin, and then it says 2 videos, the work of Sabrina Wallace and government's tech control over humans. Again, a couple of the graphics that I included within the actual Substack article are 2 graphics that she highlights within her presentation, and you're going to want to get comfortable with these 2 videos. The first one, part 1, is about 23 minutes long, and then the second one is about 44 minutes long. It's well worth it, and it's scary. It really is scary stuff, and again, this is something that has been in place for quite some time. I mean, take, for example, something as simple as the cell phone. The cell phone, as we know it now, again, back when I was 18 years old, that's when the cell phone first popped up. And a lot of people, again, we were in college, we were 18. Again, almost everybody had a cell phone, but we didn't use it, of course, the way that we use it now. And that's part of this digital twin idea, is that the technology advances itself to the point where the device becomes a necessity, so the brain starts to think. The brain starts to view the piece of technology. There are many points to our presentation, of course. This is just, I think, one of them. It certainly is my take, but that the piece of technology becomes an extension of the human body. It's like a separate limb. And without it, and all of the things that it can do, you trick the human mind into believing that it needs it when in fact it does not. And this, of course, becomes ubiquitous across the board with numerous pieces of technology. But as we know, if you can put down a piece of technology and not use it, you find out actually that you don't need it. That's where there's that old saying in the movie Fight Club, the things that we own end up owning us. Well, we have to break that chain to some extent, but unfortunately, as even she says, it's becoming unavoidable. That government has this giant plan in place and this giant scheme in place, of course, to make everything the same and then rework the wiring and the neurobiological network in our own minds and in our own brain to be attached to this technology. and then the technology hurts us, and then we go back to the technology anyway. Not to mention, of course, injecting people with nanoparticles and how that all ties in as well. And it most certainly does. So again, if you haven't watched those videos, they are uploaded on my Substack channel. I highly recommend it. And there you go. Okay, where to go from here? My God in heaven. There is a lot of stuff. In fact, I'll tell you what, let me mention this very quickly too. This was something that, ironically enough, just popped up the other day, and I thought, well, yeah, this is a perfect example of the digital twin. Microsoft has now created another open AI system, and it's called GPT-440, or the Omni model. And there's a video on Disclosed TV on their Telegram channel, which I'll put in the next war video. And it's this guy, and he's got his iPhone, and he's talking with a female robot, and they're having this back and forth conversation. And he says, "Can you, hey robot, can you tell what I'm doing right now and where I am when I just show you with my phone?" And he waves his phone around the room, and then the robot is learning the images that the guy is showing the robot through the phone. And then the robot starts to tell the guy what the guy is either doing or what he is about to do based on, again, the images that have just been shown to the robot through the phone. It's the most jacked up thing that that I've certainly seen in current time. And I can't help but think to myself, this right here is how stupid a person has to be to not know that they are digitally controlled. First of all, I don't find any of that interesting in the slightest. Having a conversation with the robot, a back and forth, "Hey robot, what do you think about this?" I mean, I know people have those Alexas and stuff, but all that garbage never appealed to me, not in the slightest. Again, if I want to look something up, I'm just going to look something up. If I want something to play something, I'm just going to hit the play button and I'm going to find it myself. I'm not going to openly have this conversation with the wireless robot so that it's learning what I'm interested in and then, providing particular things for me based on what it thinks I'm interested in. But again, an individual waving their phone around their room and having this constant conversation with the robot seems completely useless to me, but that's the point. That's the entire scheme here. That's the whole plan. The plan is to waste people's time, rework the biological neural network inside of human beings, and make them more like machines. And this guy pretty much proves it. I mean, at the end of this little minute-long video, you wonder whether or not the guy is smarter or the robot is. Because the guy's participating in this useless activity with a robot that's really just allowing the robot to learn about the human being's surroundings. It's disturbing. That's the excuse me, that's the easiest way I can put it. It's just flat out disturbing. So again, there's no doubt that this is being weaponized against people. There's no doubt that, again, we know that these technological devices emit copious amounts of electromagnetic radiation. They cause cancerous and non-cancerous tumors in people, inflammation of the organs, 1,000 other things. And it's not good. The prognosis for all of this in the long run is certainly not a good one. And Sabrina Wallace makes an excellent point in her presentations, and she says this: these people who work for these companies and work for these government agencies are being paid to do this. You don't actually think they're going to back off on it, do you? The only thing that causes anybody to back off of it is if the agency itself is destroyed, is if the work of these people is destroyed, and we get back to living like regular human beings in society. But unfortunately, again, you still have the Elon Musks of the world who are con artists, in my humble opinion, and think that they are massive creators of this, that, or the other, when in fact they're not. They say one thing on one hand, and then they say the exact opposite on the other. That they're, pro-humanity, and they see the destruction of technology in the hands of people and what it's doing, and at the exact same time, he's creating automobiles that are filled with batteries that are roasting people's genitals as they don't drive themselves down the road on their own. and yet at the exact same time can be easily hacked into so that the automobile reaches exorbitant speeds and smashes into a tree or a building filled with people or what have you, hence the Tesla nonsense. Again, this this kind of stuff is so disturbing, it has to be shut down. There has to be some kind of military level intervention that closes this down permanently, destroys the work, hangs the people who are a part of all of this. Of course, under the guise of it being part of advancing the human race and blah, blah, blah. It's not. It's advancing the human race into extinction. That's the long-term goal of all of this. And that, of course, robots can make better decisions than we can, and robots can learn quicker than we can, and 1,000 other things. But again, we're already seeing the digital twin. Again, as Sabrina Wallace brings up in the presentations in the Substack article here, she specifically, again, highlights the fact that these white coat dummy doctors are just reading emails, and you've heard me say this on the show, but they're just reading emails and just doing what the email tells them without thought or favor or questioning a single thing. It's just, well, this is the way that it is, and the email told me, so I'll just do this, or I'll just push this drug, or this will be the solution to your problem, or here's the remedy, when in fact it isn't. It's a robot pushing poison on people, but it's still utilizing a human, an actual human being with blood inside of their body as the facilitator of that neurological message, that biological nanotech message. So it really does make one wonder if they ask themselves the question, who's really in control? Is it the robot, the people running the robot, the people scripting things for the robot to say to other humans? I mean, who's really in control here? Because I guarantee it's not the doctors. It's not the medical profession. They're following orders of literal robots. That's already happening. So, again, the only way that we escape this is, of course, by leaving these particular environments. That's number one. That's how we vote with our feet. But there has to be some deeper level of intervention here that shuts the whole thing down, just destroys it. And again, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. I just think it's unfortunately becoming far too ubiquitous to the point where the mere suggestion of even shutting something like that down across the nation, across the world, in multiple facets of multiple industry, that you would be looked at like you're a crazy person. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. But again, my article over there very quickly, I didn't write hardly anything. I just uploaded the videos. It's titled Your Digital Twin. So bounce on over there and check that out if you are interested. Again, I highly recommend those videos. Get in a comfortable chair, lie back, watch them, and take deep breaths, because it's intense stuff. And like I said, she's created another 33-minute video where she's talking about the student connection in this whole neural pathway, and how they're probably, again, I haven't finished the video, but how they're probably, again, rewiring students, and it's not far-fetched at all. I mean, I've practically brought it up here on the show numerous times, but yeah. I mean, they're pushing this on minors to no end. And they, of course, are using the useful idiots of school boards and superintendents and school teachers and everybody else in the business of education to push this technology on children, not knowing the short-term and long-term ramifications and the complete control plan that does actually exist here. Okay, so there's that. Moving on, I wanted to mention these 2 quick stories just very briefly, in particular for my Canada audience. I fully understand that there's 2 things that have happened, at least that have crossed my path here over the last month or so, that I've paid attention to, but I'll fully admit I don't have all the ins and outs. The first one has to do with some bill that Trudeau passed, or law that he put into place, having to do with retroactively and actively going after people who are saying things online that he disagrees with, or that the government overlords disagree with, and then, of course, imprisoning these individuals or fining them for, again, expressing themselves online or saying things online that, again, government does not agree with. I don't know all of the specifics of that particular bill and or law, however it works up there. I'm not entirely sure, but again, if there's, and I know that there are Canadian audience members here, some of which email me, of course, but if you know more about that, or it is actually legit and not a complete crock, please email me what you can and give me your 2 cents on the entire issue. I truly am more interested in it. And instead of just reading a general article off of the internet, I figured I'd actually ask the Canada audience their 2 cents on what they actually think is going on here. So there was that. There was also the story about the indigenous. How would I put this? The old story of, again, the indigenous schools, of course, abusing children from a long time ago, and then there being mass graves, and that somebody put forth a theory that there were multiple mass graves next to these churches, and then it was basically a giant scheme to essentially dig up absolutely nothing, because the entire thing, again, was basically sold as a hoax to people, even though I'm sure that endless indigenous students, of course, were raped and murdered back in the day. I mean, this is a fact. But whether they're in mass graves or even next to churches, that particular part was basically a purposeful scheme in an effort to destroy said churches where these so-called mass graves existed. I think I'm getting that part right. Either way, in the midst of all of that, they ended up destroying at least 75 to 85 churches and just flat out destroying them. And then basically saying, well, see, there's no mass graves here. Oh, well, your church is destroyed. Anywho, on to the next so-called church where there's a so-called mass grave, and then they would destroy that too. So it was a giant scheme, basically, probably set up by government to solidify the individuals who know that there were indigenous murders taking place of indigenous children and a number of other individuals, certainly within these schools, if not churches, but then at the exact same time, it was a giant scheme to destroy the churches. Again, that's my interpretation of what's been taking place there, but again, I'm going to openly defer to the Canada audience on this. And that if, again, you know far more about this or you have an opinion on it and you want to email me, please do so. I would certainly love to learn more about it. Okay. Just wanted to bring that to people's attention because I didn't want to leave my Canada audience out of the picture here, out of the loop. I certainly have seen those stories and know that that's going on, and that, that's certainly a real thing. Okay. Moving on here, I wanted to mention this too. This was bouncing around on X the other day, and then I ended up seeing it somewhere else. And there's an individual who goes by the name of Jash, Jash, J-A-S-H, Delani, if I'm saying that right, at Old Books Guy. And they put out this post where they titled it 10 Concepts from Ancient Rome That Explain the Modern World. And this is very well done, I think. It's a nice little summary of 10 particular rules, laws, hypotheses, effects, or principles, or syndromes even that are currently taking place right now. And these are just some of them. These are 10 in his particular opinion, but I wanted to read through these because I found them interesting. Of course, there's a few that I would add to this list, but this is interesting nonetheless. Number 1, he has listed the Tactus Razor. Quote, if you want to know who controls you, see who you're not allowed to criticize. This is how comedians accidentally reveal a society's hierarchy. They call everyone naked and then soon discover who the king is. This is certainly something that is happening. There's no doubt about that. I would even add Occam's razor to that and say that the answer lies in the explanation that requires the least amount of assumptions. That the answer is far more simple, I think, than what people would lead others to certainly believe. The second one that they have listed here is the slavery syndrome. It says Rome historian Sallust, whichever pronunciation I guess is correct. I'm certainly wrong on it, I'm certain, but they said, quote, few men desire liberty. Most men wish only for a just master, unquote. Then he said, genuine liberty means making decisions 24/7, parsing right from wrong, solving pesky dilemmas using nothing but one's own mind. Liberty is thus too cognitively tasking for most. People would rather outsource their agency. And I agree with that. I don't agree with outsourcing your agency or not thinking as an individual, of course, but I agree that this is a syndrome. The slavery syndrome is certainly one that has taken hold here. And again, it ties right back into the digital twin. Isn't that ironic? That's the irony of the whole thing, is that this is proving that very point, and vice versa. That people would rather, again, rely on technology pieces to tell them what to do and how to behave and how to think and how to act, instead of sitting, thinking, and saying, this is right, this is wrong, this is the way to really think about something, instead of, again, just getting on Google, typing in a question, and then believing the thing that it presents you. But unfortunately, again, bringing this back to children, this is one of the things that's being ingrained in them. They're always being taught to not think as an individual. They're always being taught to simply, I don't want to use the word gravitate, but magnetize themselves, so to speak, from one group think or way of thinking to another. And then in the middle of all of that, they never figure out who they actually are. And before you know it, they're a full-grown adult. And then what? Is it too late by then? Maybe, maybe not. But that is part of the matrix, and that's part of the matrix that people have got to break free from. But it's very, very hard, because society is built around that matrix and with that matrix in mind to make sure that people don't escape. The third one that they have listed here, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of some of these, but it's titled the Polybius Warning. They have written here, 2nd century BC historian Polybius warned that a failing birth rate precedes civilization collapse. Fewer births mean men and women have checked out. Sloth grows, spiritual concerns are replaced by material ones, and population falls. Polybius believed, or Bias, however it's pronounced, believed that Greek civilization fell due to its own low birth rate. Well, that's certainly one reason. Corruption, degeneracy, increased sin, a lack of, again, thinking as an individual, and then seeing and recognizing the enemy, calling it out, and then, of course, attacking it. And, a million other reasons, but yeah, no doubt about it. This giant culture that we live in, where individuals are remarkably self-absorbed, vain, and 1,000 other things, and then they actually convince themselves that they don't need children, nor want them, and then start to actually view them as being an impossibility or an inconvenience. It's the most unnatural thing that exists. It's disgusting, in my opinion. And I don't have kids, but I've never viewed them as being an inconvenience. And I've never said to myself, my God, I can't afford one. Or, what a burden that would be. No. I mean, this is part of life. This is one of the things that is supposed to take place. Now, it doesn't take place with everyone, but wanting children, and certainly the want to reproduce, is, I believe, innate in all of us. Certainly to some degree, but when you see these whack job individuals, bragging about their abortions, and I mean, my God, that's not innate in people. People create that. They create that illusion within their own minds, and then they end up living that illusion. What a nightmare. An absolute nightmare. The fourth one here is the Pliny Principle, and it says, René Descartes, I believe this is French, so I'm going to pronounce it that way, pinned bodily existence into the mind, saying, quote, I think, therefore I am. But ancient Rome's magistrate, Pliny the Younger, said that it was the other way around. Quote, it is wonderful how the mind is stirred and quickened into activity by brisk bodily exercise, unquote. Only physical exertion, he wrote, leads to healthy mental activity. Agreed. And fortunately, we have I've talked about the Civil War on the show before. There are numerous wavelengths of thought on this, but in one facet of society, you have individuals just being fat mouth breathers. And then on the other side, you really do see this influx of individuals taking care of themselves, finally, and exercising and eating right. I mean, some of us have done this most of our lives, but then there are people, again, who are just starting to figure this out. That if you just dedicate 3 months of your life into just doing the right things, your entire mind can change. That if you care about yourself physically, the mental and emotional part can take care of itself, and same thing with the social part as well. But that, of course, comes with making other healthy decisions and 1,000 other things. But yeah, exercise and strength training and a proper diet is certainly a big part of it, but we're also seeing a lack of that at the exact same time. That's sort of the tug of war back and forth that always exists in society. The next one he lists here is number 5, which is the uses of folly. He says Roman historian Herodias, if I'm saying that right, probably not, said, quote, "If a man insisted always on being serious and never allowed himself a bit of fun and relaxation, he would go mad," unquote. They wrote, "Fun is your brain stretching, dancing, moving without the shackles of logic. You need it. Lesson, combine monumental sincerity with some trolling," unquote. Of course, having a sense of humor matters, and even, again, playing particular things or doing particular things that maybe you used to do when you were a kid, even for a short period of time, yeah. I mean, it can take your mind off of particular things, but you certainly don't want to live in an illusion either. So that's a delicate balance also, but yeah. I completely agree with that, no doubt about it. The next one he has listed here is number 6, the virtue vius rule, if I'm saying that right. They have written here, modern architects love asymmetrical structures, but ancient Roman architect Virtuvius said a building out of proportions is like a deformed body. Nature herself, quote, composed the human body, unquote, and the rest of creation using due proportions, quote unquote. The Virtuvius rule says no symmetry, off to the cemetery. Yeah, I would agree with that too. You need balance, and you need to look like you are in form and of strong structure, no doubt about it, because if you're not, well, that's not going to work out. Certainly not going to work out for a variety of reasons. Number 7 is the tyranny of laws. They wrote, more laws don't mean a more just society. And Tacitus said, quote, the more numerous the laws, the more corrupt the government, unquote. Make 1,000,000 laws and you can catch anyone for anything anytime you want. Yeah, and isn't that the thing happening right now? That most certainly is. That's well said and well defined, no doubt about it. Number 8, the Cassius hypothesis. Historian Cassius wrote that while monarchy needed only one man to make the right decision, democracy needed millions. Which one is more likely to succeed? No wonder Cassius wrote that, quote, successes have always been greater and more frequent under kings than under popular rule, unquote. Yeah, and this too again is the missing part of quote-unquote democracy that people love to say, but they have no idea what it means. And democracy is majority rules no matter what, that the majority gets to do whatever it is that they want to do. Now, what are we watching, of course, in our society and certainly in societies around the world? It's governments against the people. The governments don't have the majority in numbers, but they have the perceived influence, so they think, even though they don't even have that. But what they do have is the money, and they have the control. So again, so they think. But if we walk away from government, what's government's response? Government's response is to make more laws and to clamp down more on the people that they intend to control, which is us. So it's not that they have the literal numbers of the majority. They certainly don't. Not today anyway, but what they have is, or what they think that they have is enough control and enough of a seeming majority in order to continue to do the things that they're doing and get away with it. It's just like the audio clip I played last week of Mitt Romney and Anthony Blinken talking with one another. And Mitt Romney can't for the life of him figure out why Israel's public relations aren't working out very well. He just doesn't know why the American people aren't buying into it the way that they used to. I mean, it was an open admission that Israel's been lying to us since the beginning of time. It was like, well, Israel used to be really good at lying, but now all of a sudden the American people aren't buying the lies anymore. I mean, I don't know what's going on. Well, yeah, they're not. That's because you don't have the majority of the wavelength of thought that actually exists now, which is individuals waking up. That's why this is the Great Awakening. It's people literally bypassing, quote unquote, manufactured authority figures and actually listening to God as to what decisions they should be making. And then, of course, sitting down by themselves or with their loved ones and making decisions together for the betterment of themselves. Not the so-called community even, or even politicians, certainly not them, or government institutions. They're leaving government institutions, which is a great thing. So there you go. There's number 9 here, which is the Livy effect. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Historian Livy lived through the Roman Civil War and discovered the butterfly effect 2,000 years before the chaos theorists. Quote, events of great consequence often spring from trifling circumstances, unquote. Politics, economics, human decisions, ideas. They form one giant mesh of life, and tiny acts can snowball. They most certainly can. They most certainly do. The individual against the masses. One person stands up against the masses, says something or does something, and then endless people follow. Or, at the very least, they share that message with endless people and hopefully it wakes people up. It's like the meme that many of us have seen. Again, it's all over social media and has been for years, but it's the lone individual, and they are in the foreground of this black and white hand-drawn meme. And there's a word bubble above them, and they're saying something like, yes, you were all wrong. And then they're simply looking at a giant crowd in the background of people looking back at them. Again, it's the lone individual against the masses saying, yes, I was right, you all were wrong. And we're certainly living through that too, are we not? And then number 10 here, the juvenile principle. Quote, give them bread and circuses and they will never revolt, unquote. Roman poet Juvenal believed a long peace, quote unquote, was as evil as a war. The modern world needs to heed Juvenal's warning against luxury. To let, quote unquote, bread and circus sedate us into inaction is to betray our very soul, unquote. Yeah, that was well done. I would add, on top of course, Occam's razor, I would add the Dunning-Kruger effect to that as well. This is, of course, a particular phenomenon that I've brought up on the show before. And it, again, has to do with individuals' false belief in their own intellect. And when they surround themselves with other individuals who believe the same things that they believe, then they will literally have conversations and or arguments or debates over something that isn't even real, and yet they all think that they're right in the end. And then again, they just continue to chew on things that aren't real, saying them as if they are when in fact they're not, and then at the end of the conversation, or at the end of the time, they actually believe that they are smarter or perceived as being smarter than they actually are. My litmus test for that, my go-to, if anybody's interested in watching an observational experiment on the Dunning-Kruger effect, I've said it before, it's the television show The View. All you have to do is watch one episode of The View from beginning to end, and you will see the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. It is quite literally like watching chickens in a room as a scientist, and you are observing them and taking notes on what they're doing and how they're behaving and how they're clucking and what it is that they're saying. The women on The View are the dumbest human beings on the face of the planet. That is my scientific, unbiased opinion and conclusion on that show. They quite literally believe that they are highly intelligent when in fact they are scum and probably have IQs bouncing around 85, if not lower than that. And I'm probably being generous. They are arguably, again, some of the dumbest humans that exist. But, the show goes on. And people actually listen to it. In fact, it's in waiting rooms, and it's, they play it in airports, and my God, it's just, I mean, they're so dumb on The View. How dumb are they, Sean? They're so dumb on The View that they actually believe that people tune into them to get the real news as to what's really going on, and yet they don't know that they are the butt of almost every joke that exists on social media. That show alone has created endless memes, which are not used to make the women on the show look good. They're used to make them the butt of the joke all of the time. And they have no idea. Nor do they ever address it, nor do they even care. And if they did address it on the show, again, I don't watch the show, so I don't know what they talk about all the time. But if they did actually bring it up on the show, they would justify it by engaging in the Dunning-Kruger effect all over again and then double down on their own perceived level of intelligence, which is actually non-existent. And then they will all agree with one another and then on to the next subject. It's amazing. They're mentally ill. We have got to bring back mental institutions. I'm telling you, there have to be more of them. I can't wait. I can't wait. I look forward to that day, if that day ever comes. Okay. Now there's this. I want to revisit a few education-related things here and then bring up some new stuff also. First of all, I have this on good authority that the local superintendent where I live has openly admitted behind closed doors that they fully know that more people are homeschooling their children today than ever before. That they know that enrollment is not what it used to be, and that more people are opting for homeschooling and pulling their children out of the system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is good news. This is very good news. The more that these dummies openly admit it, it means that they've lost. It means that they know that they're losing. Doesn't mean that they're going to quit. It doesn't mean that they're not going to double down on their bad policy. It doesn't mean they're going to continue to, that they'll stop justifying their participation in the corrupt brainwashing torture system that is the American K-12 experience. Public, private, or charter, however you want to slice it. But it is an open admission, and they are doing this more and more, and again, it's even coming to the forefront where they're even admitting this in news reports, some of which, of course, I've played on the show here. They fully know that more people are homeschooling, and this is one of the reasons not only why enrollment is dropping, but schools are closing. This is a victory. This will always be a victory. This is one of those victories that is worth celebrating. It's one of those things, again, that we have to continue to mention to people so that we can keep that ball rolling. That's a very good thing. There is also this, and this is specific to the state of Ohio. So, I've also, of course, brought this school board up before, and I'm going to bring them up again. There was a recent school board meeting in Westerville, Ohio, where my niece and nephew attend, and these dummies, I mean, they are a certain kind of special. That's about all I can say. As you've heard me say before in the public comments section, which can get interesting, there is very few public comments, if any, on a month-in, month-out basis. Unfortunately, this particular time, although it was a bit of a double-edged sword, but part of it was rather informative, which I'll read here in just a minute, but I was completely unaware of this until this nitwit came to the lectern and decided to speak about it. In Ohio, there is Senate Bill 168, which has passed, which was written in the Senate by Ohio senators, Republicans, for whatever that's worth. And it passed committee, and then it made its way into the House, and now it's in House committee, apparently, and it's, again, basically set to pass, so everybody seems to think. Let me read this very quickly, and then I'll read you I'll do my best to reiterate the response from the individual who spoke about this at the board meeting, and then what the board members responded. And they were all in agreement that this is a bad thing. They think that this is a bad thing, which means if a school board thinks that a Senate bill is a bad thing, ladies and gentlemen, it's a good thing. So here's what the actual Senate bill is about. Again, this is Ohio Senate passes Reynolds Education Bill, and this was back on December 13th of 2013. Now, of course, it's made its way through different committees, and it's advancing itself and will eventually find its way to the governor's desk, hopefully at some point. Although it's hard to say what DeWine will do regarding this, but when it comes to education, he's pretty much been a school choice guy from what I recall anyway. But here's what this article says very quickly. It says, quote, "Today the Ohio Senate passed Senate Bill 168, championed by State Senator Michelle Reynolds, Republican from Canal Westchester, or Winchester rather. It says the legislation empowers schools in their mission to educate Ohio's children by eliminating excess and burdensome regulations and addressing teacher shortages." Now, before I continue here, allow me to translate this just briefly. What this means is they know they have a teacher shortage. Now, they don't know why, and if they ever found out why, they're certainly not going to admit it, but there is a teacher shortage. They know this. It's now in a Senate bill regarding education, and they're also, again, as it said, eliminating excess and burdensome regulations. What this does is, which is why the public schools hate it, and why school boards hate it, is because it opens the door for more charter schools and private schools. That's why. Now, we know the impact, of course, that homeschooling is having on children and families and making them more well-rounded people and self-educated and self-taught and free-thinking and independent-minded and independent-actioned and the whole thing. And certainly closer to God, because you're not going to find God in a public school system, not in my humble opinion. But either way, instead of homeschooling, which is what many individuals are doing, and that, of course, being the fastest way to collapse the American public school system, there is a three-pronged approach that does destroy an American public government-run school system, and it is the combination of all three of these: homeschooling, charter schools popping up, and public schools popping up, because everybody with a brain in their skull is dissatisfied with public education. That's not to say that private schools are the best. That's not to say that charter schools are either. Not even to say that homeschooling curriculum is the greatest thing since sliced bread either. I'm sure some of it's garbage, but much of it is absolutely fantastic. Not to mention you're never limited to what you can look up and what you can learn. Whereas in those other three environments, you might be. Either way, this is a good thing. And this, again, is why the public school system cannot stand state politicians advocating for quote-unquote school choice and then making it easier for, say, a said graduate in a teacher education department of a college or a university to say, you know what, when I leave college with a teaching degree, I don't want to teach in the public school system. I'd rather go into the private or charter school system instead. That's something that's been around for a while, and it's something that's actually been increasing, I would say, certainly within the last 10 years, that more and more people are getting out of that brainwashing mentality of, well, I've left the university system with a teaching degree, now I have to go right into the public school system again. I mean, they're seeking out more private funded education and certainly more charter school education as well. So yeah, it's a good thing. But again, that's why public school boards cannot stand it. And again, I'll tell you about the response from the Westerville School Board, because they were all in agreement that this is a very bad thing, and they supported this particular individual. And I think that person was either a teacher in the district or whatever, but they were clearly mad, and they came up and said, this is not good. This is going to filter more people out of the public school system, and we need the public school system because, oh God, what will happen if we don't have it? They're just so brainwashed and they have no idea. It's really sad. It's sad to watch. Anyway, it goes on here. And it says the following, quote, Senate Bill 168 is the product of countless conversations with school leaders on how we can help them provide quality service without overburdening them, Reynolds said. Quote, the bill updates and streamlines state law to give our teachers, administrators, and kids the tools they need to succeed, unquote. It says Senate Bill 168 improves our schools by, and there's a number of bullet points here. There are 5 of them. The first one, removing the requirement that top-tier teachers must have master's degrees. Well, dumbing down a little bit of everybody. Although, again, there's a flip side to that coin, which of course means that just because a person has a master's degree doesn't make them intelligent. We know this to be true. More degrees and more institutionalized education does not equate to intelligence. Letters after or before a person's name don't always equate to intelligence. We fully understand this. We know this. But the reason also is because they know that people don't have the money, nor do they have the time. They want bodies in classrooms and in schools instead of this constant, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to, have this degree or that degree, this licensure, that licensure. It goes on here. It says this keeps good teachers in the classroom and prioritizes, promoting them based off of their abilities, not whether or not they pursue graduate school. Again, to some degree, it's like moving deck furniture on the Titanic again, but even so, this is interesting. And I find it funny that public school leaders, quote unquote, don't like this or are dissatisfied by this. This is hilarious. The next bullet point is authorizing a temporary non-renewable license that allows a school or district to employ an individual with an out-of-state educator license for up to 1 year so that teachers moving to Ohio can work here while they seek permanent licensure. Now, what's interesting about that is that's not new in the United States, but it's new in Ohio. See, when I moved to Florida from Ohio with a degree from Miami University, I had a teaching license from Ohio, but I taught uncertified in 2 subject areas, math and science, in the state of Florida for 2 years. Again, at the time, you could do that. I don't know what it's like in Florida now. But this particular move isn't necessarily a new one. They're just looking around at other states and seeing what other states are doing and saying, well, maybe this can help us. And not to mention, again, there's reciprocity with most of these teaching licenses from state to state. So, I don't know. I guess they view this as being a convenience. The next one says, granting prospective teachers a modernized pathway into the classroom if they hold a master's in the field and pass a content examination. This gets competent professionals in the classroom to teach our kids while holding them to the same professional development standards as a licensed educator. Therefore, translation, if you have a master's degree, not in any field of education, but say in a particular subject area or a closely related subject area, and then you take a content examination or a content licensure exam in the content area, say math, science, geography, history, whatever, and you pass it, then you become a licensed educator. This is certainly a convenience. There's no doubt about it. This is a way to get individuals who have never been in the education profession into the education profession. But as you've heard me say, at this stage of the game, they're not doing it because they think that it's a morally sound decision to make. They're doing it because they want money. They want a job. Again, you have to question the mental acuity of an individual if they willingly want to go into the education profession in this day and age. You really have to. The next bullet point says allowing a district to use its own locally developed teacher and principal evaluation systems rather than the state evaluation framework. This is interesting too. This actually advocates for making things more local and more unique and more different. I'm not saying it's going to be better, but it would certainly, again, localize certain evaluation systems that they choose. And then at the exact same time, we can't kid ourselves. If this takes place, then you're going to still have school districts that are in surrounding areas and surround one another. You're still going to have them basically adopting the same kind of system. So I would say that it's the illusion of individuality. Because again, let's face it, these institutions don't even know what individuality means. They can't even spell it. So everything that they do, they're doing because someone else told them to do it or because they agree to do it with other people, so that if it fails, then they can just blame one another and, that's the way that it is. I mean, yeah. They don't know the definition of entrepreneurship either. So they're certainly not going to stick their neck out and create an evaluation system that makes sense just for them. They're in the business of cutting and pasting. That's basically all that they do all of the time. Here's the last one, though. It says, quote, permitting high-performing districts to renew their status every 3 years so that they may continue to utilize the extra flexibility that comes with that designation, unquote. And again, those are just some of the bullet points. I'm sure there are many, many more. At least these are just the ones that are highlighted within. But again, what we fully understand here is that this is certainly going to filter out more students and increase the likelihood of private and charter schools popping up across Ohio. And this is not something that the American public school system, certainly at the state level, wants. They don't want this. In fact, that now leads me, I guess, to the Westerville City Schools school board comments on this particular issue. They, of course, all agreed with the guy because the guy came up and he was like, this is bad for public schools. This is going to filter more teachers out and more students, and we can't have that, and blah, blah, blah. Again, the public school system hates you. They hate you. And they say so in their meetings all of the time. How dare you criticize the public school system? How dare you pull your children out? How dare you do this or think differently or think this way or XYZ? I mean, they openly and consistently state that they hate you in their own unique ways. And it really is gross. And they don't hear themselves being as critical of the masses as they are. And if they do hear themselves, they just flat out don't care. But one by one, all of the board members decided to comment on this. And one of them openly stated that, we need taxpayer-funded schools and that they are good for the common good and that public schools are a necessity for any community and they hold up the best and the brightest. We are not, what was her exact words? This was Dr. Nancy Nestor Baker. This is the gal on the school board who voted for her own daughter and voted to give a pay raise to her own daughter. Massive ethics violation, but either way. She again openly stated that just because they exist within the public school realm does not mean that they are what did she say? Anti-private. We are not anti-private school. We are pro-public school. Oh, how diplomatic of you. How diplomatic. Keeping in mind, of course, this is the exact same school district that openly tells the voters in that town that they're going to put massive levies on the next ballot to continue to fund their brainwashing operation and make the renovations within particular buildings that they think that they need to make. Because, well, we have some old buildings and they need help and we might want to build another one and blah, blah, blah. It's just nuts. The people who advocate for public school love to be leeches. It makes my skin crawl. They just love leeching on the taxpayer. And in this particular board meeting, again, they openly stated that in their own special way, that we are dependent on the people and the taxpayer, and government isn't always giving us what we need, so we have to go to the public, and we believe that we serve the public's best needs, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, they don't even hear themselves. They have no idea what's going on in the world. As you've heard me say before, more specifically, their treasurer can't for the life of them figure out why their health insurance costs have gone up to 13.2%, have increased by that much. She said, quote unquote, that's just the way the market is right now. No, it isn't. You're all jabbed. And the jabbed are sick. And the jabbed are more sick now than they've ever been, and utilizing their doctors more now than they ever have, and using their health insurance and paying more than they ever have. And you think that's going to get better with time? With a biological weapon coursing through their veins? Nope. The public school system is built on a foundation of corrupt conformity. And we are seeing the fruits that blossom as a result of that foundation. That's what we're seeing here. That's everything that's happening. So let me move on to a few more education stories, because again, this is part of the so-called fruits, the corrupt fruits that are coming to bear here as a result of that disgusting foundation. First of all, in Idaho, the fact that this even has to be a thing is beyond me, but this was signed into law, albeit a good thing, but a sad state of affairs that I'm actually having to utter these words. Idaho, as of July 1st, is banning all pronoun use in all schools. I mean, good? Congratulations? Why did it even get to that stage? Why did it even get to be such a problem? Why even have the pronouns and all of that brainwashing nonsense? They actually had to make a bill to outlaw it. I mean, again, good for them. If you have to make laws, that counter the words that come out of the mouths of the mentally insane, then good, go for it. But I would prefer you just lock up the mentally insane rather than make a law against a thing that's not even real. I mean, yeah, it's exhausting. Laws for things that are pretend, that children create. Unbelievable. Let's see. Here's another one. I was going to mention this on the last show, and I did, and I skipped over it, but I want to play some audio here. This is from Fox 31, and this is out of Denver, and it was titled, "It Took an Hour for School to Call Police After Playground Kidnapping Attempt." Yep. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Newly released documents shedding new light on the clear missteps the school took when handling an attempted kidnapping at Black Forest Hills Elementary last month that was caught on camera.
Police arrested a man with a record of sexual offenses after they say he walked onto school grounds and plunged at a fifth grade student. Fox 31's Aaliyah Sims joins us live at the district's Educational Services Center with a closer look. All new tonight at 9. Aaliyah.
Yeah, Erica, this 5-page document details the sequence of events and the missteps that happened in the afternoon of April 19th. Now, a couple of things that stood out to me. It took almost an hour for police to be called about the situation, and even then, the school was never placed on a secure lockdown, despite the suspect still being at large. Parents, of course, outraged with the new findings here. It's hard enough for parents to watch this disturbing surveillance, but now they have to read the facts.
There is a huge sense of anger, right? Timeline still, and there's lots of things that haven't been put into place.
In this 5-page investigation document outlining the sequence of events, we learned 33-year-old Solomon Galligan entered the campus around 1:01 during 5th grade recess, while 3 staff members were supervising students.
3 set of eyes, right? They need more people, and that's one of the requests that we've made is we need more paras, we need more TAs. If you're going to put these people in charge, they need to be properly trained, right? Head should be on a swivel.
15 minutes after the situation occurred, when staff asked the principal if they should call police, she said, quote, "No, let's wait on security."
The fact that they were like, no, don't call 911, like that part definitely glared at me. Like, who makes that call? Like, who would like that would have been number one.
At 1:27, unaware of the situation, third grade teachers took their students outside for recess, where students remained for 7 minutes. It wasn't until 1:59, almost an hour after the interaction, until police were called to get more patrols. At 12:16, parents received this voicemail.
Unidentified adult male entered the field, approached a group of students, engaged them briefly, and then exited the property.
About a half hour later, students were dismissed. A few walked or rode their bike home while the suspect still on the loose.
It could have been in Colorado Springs, within an hour, right? It's really easy to get far away in that amount of time. Super frustrating as a parent.
Yeah, so the school did make an administrative change by replacing the principal as well as implementing new safety changes, but parents are still not assured. They really want other parents to come out to Monday's school board meeting at Thunder Ridge beginning at 7 for them to voice their concerns about the mistakes that happened dealing with this situation. Now, in order to do that, you do have to register before noon. We do have a link on our website on how you can do so. Live tonight in Aurora, Aaliyah Sims, Fox 31.
Well, I wish I could say it was all new and that all of this was just unbelievable, but it clearly isn't. This is par for the course. Par for the course. I've said it time and time again and written it literally in all of my books. All of them. Every single one. You're going to find a line in any of them that says, image protection is priority number one for schools. Calling the cops is the last thing that they want to do. The last thing. In particular, again, if they can cover it up or even make it sound like what took place wasn't that bad, which clearly they did in that pre-recorded message. A complete stranger wandered onto the property and engaged in students. No one was hurt and everything is back to normal. Nothing to see here. These are not the droids you're looking for. Time and time again, they do this all of the time. And time again, ladies and gentlemen, parents send their children right back to those environments. And what did they blame? They blamed a lack of staff. We need more staff out there. We need more people watching these children. And how could they? And we need heads on swivels and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, I suppose. No doubt about it. But the actual document that the school created, the so-called 5-page document, down the side of it, it had the saying, dedicated to excellence. I mean, the nerve, the absolute hubris and nerve of these people. Again, they sat on this story for at least 2 hours. The police didn't arrive for 2 hours. Yeah. They moved the school principal to another location. There's certainly still a district employee. Keep in mind, if this was a school teacher covering this up in some form or fashion, they'd lose their job. Certainly, if it was a school teacher that other administrators didn't like, they would lose their job in the blink of an eye. But if it's an administrator that most people get along with, they say, well, there's no way you could have prevented this. But just to satisfy the public, we're going to move you to a different position. Have a nice day, and we'll replace you with someone else. And then, again, the public will be satisfied that we've actually done something different. They haven't done anything different. The crime is always in the cover-up. If they'd have just called the police, looked for the guy, had him arrested, which apparently they did arrest him eventually, I think. And basically, I mean, that's all they had to do. That's such an easy policy. It's such an easy, it doesn't even have to be a flippin' policy. That's called common sense. But as we know, there's a lack of that right now. All over the world, certainly in American schools. But again, if they can't follow that policy, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, there are endless policies that they can't memorize and they can't follow. If they don't know that children running into a school building saying stranger danger, someone tried to grab Billy on the playground and the individual might still be out there or they might not. If that doesn't immediately cause an individual to pick up a phone and hit 911, you have a serious problem. You have a cognitive problem there. And it's not just the principal, it's numerous people. Because you know that those children were telling endless individuals. Because it was an hour later when a resource officer arrived. But don't worry, We'll send Billy and Sally back to the same building the very next day, and I'm sure everything will change. Everything will be better in the blink of an eye. It's absolutely incredible. Again, it reminds me very quickly of a story I've told on the show before, but one of my last years teaching high school, it was my last year, actually. It was my last semester. I had a student of mine come up into my room at the end of the day, and again, everybody's getting on the buses, and they're walking home, and they're doing whatever. And this kid walks up to me, and he says, "Mr. Brooks, I wanted to tell you about this, about what happened yesterday on my walk home, because I don't feel like I want to walk home today because I don't know if this individual is still there or not." But he said he was walking home, and he lived down the street from where the school was, as there was kind of multiple apartment complexes or affordable housing that was down from where the school was located. And a woman pulled over as he was just walking on the sidewalk, walking home, pulled over on the side of the road next to the sidewalk and almost up onto the sidewalk, and was driving a white car. She got out of the car and she attempted to grab the kid. And the kid had a big backpack, and he just took off running. And he said, and the woman just, kept running after him, and he didn't know who the hell she was. And I said, well, what happened? He said, I just kept running, and then eventually she stopped. She turned around, ran back to her car, got in her car, and drove away, and I just ran off in a different direction. And I looked at him, and I went, all right, yeah, you shouldn't walk home today. So do this. I said, go down to the main office. I said, sit there in front of the secretary, tell the secretary what's happened, tell her that you're not going home, and tell her that you want to speak to the resource officer. And don't leave that front office until you tell this to the resource officer. I said, do you understand? He said, yes. I said, good. I said, now repeat it back to me. And he repeated back everything that I told him. I said, good. Now go do that. He went, all right, thanks. I said, sure. And I walked him down to the main office. If memory serves, I did walk him down. And then I said, he needs to speak with a resource officer. And I also said this to the secretary. And then she said, okay, well, he's out directing traffic on a Segway. And I said, yes, I'm aware he's wasting time. So, either way, he's doing whatever he was supposed to be doing, I guess, at the time. But either way, he ended up coming back in and speaking with the student. And then that was it. I was gone by then. But then the very next day, there's a knock on my door in one of the classrooms I was in. And it was that resource officer and two town detectives. And they said, all right, Sean, what happened yesterday? And tell us what he told you and, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, here's what he told me. I mean, it was almost like they were trying to blame me for something in the middle of all of that, which I thought was hilarious. But I said, did he speak with you? And he goes, yeah. I said, did he leave or did you drive him home? He goes, yeah, I got him in the squad car and drove him home that day. I said, well, what's the problem? And they were like, well, we just wanted to make sure that what he told us was what he told you, and he didn't tell you something different, whatever else. And I reiterated the story that the kid told me, and that was the end of it. I was like, yeah, all right, good luck. Good luck finding this person, whoever they are. But yeah, people try to snatch up kids walking home from school all the time, and they certainly have no problem getting on a playground and, jumping over God knows what. And it didn't even look like there was a fence in the in the security footage there taken on the school property. The guy just literally walked from the sidewalk onto the school property. It's like all those signs don't matter. No trespassing. You're not allowed to be here. Yeah. It's because sexual predators and kidnappers don't care about signs. Isn't that strange? Let's see. There's this one too, another story from Ohio. Ohio community outraged after school district allegedly withholds information on student accused of raping 9-year-old. Suspect still in class, playing sports. Oh, the yarns that I could spin, telling you numerous stories about such similar situations. Let me just get into this story here first, and then I'll just tell you a quick one. Let's see, it says the following here. A storm of controversy has enveloped Hudson High School following revelations that Jeremiah Earl Stower, an 18-year-old senior, has been attending school and participating in sports despite facing several allegations including rape and kidnapping of a 9-year-old child. Stower was indicted on February 7th of 2024 on multiple charges including rape, kidnapping, and gross sexual imposition, with the alleged offenses occurring on or around December 2nd of 2023, according to Chasing Liberty. It says, despite these charges, it's come to light that many within the school were unaware of Stower's legal troubles until recently. It says, according to the Akron Beacon Journal, the case docket, which included redactions to protect the 9-year-old's privacy, was removed from the Summit County Clerk of Court's website this week after a judge granted a defense attorney's request to seal the documents from public view, said James Pollock, a spokesman for the Summit County Prosecutor's Office. The Beacon Journal began collecting its information for this report before access to the documents was cut off. Let's see. Stirred a strong backlash from the public, particularly among students and parents connected to Hudson High. Much of the anger centers on Judge Allison Burroughs' perceived lenient treatment of the defendant and then Summit County Prosecutor Sherry Bevan Walsh's office's lackluster response. $25,000 bond, meaning that he only had to pay $2,500 to get out of jail, was placed on free-range GPS monitoring with maximum pretrial supervision and must adhere to a curfew according to court documents. He's also prohibited from having any contact with the alleged victim. The defendant was allowed to continue attending classes at Hudson High School. I'm going to wrap this up by saying the following. It is not illegal, as awful as it is, to have sexual predators, even convicted ones, still attend public schools. They still can. It's also not unusual for staff members to not be told about individuals entering their buildings with criminal records, regardless of what those criminal records are. They just aren't told. Again, some of this, unfortunately, may have to do with the fact that sometimes the guilty party is a minor, and in other cases, even in this particular case with the individual being 18 years old, they still may justify it by saying, well, we don't want to alarm people, so we'll just keep it a secret. And then they think, of course, secrecy is the way that you get things done and the way that the right thing occurs. You know, I don't know what else to say other than they continue to be the most immoral environments that exist. And people need to keep in mind that, again, individuals with criminal records will come into school buildings all of the time, on the first day of school, sometime throughout the year, and you'll never know that they have a criminal record and you'll never be told. Sometimes the counselor will be the only one who knows, sometimes a social worker, and then they leave it at that. There's not even an email or a memo that goes out to people to find this out, which means if teachers don't know, then parents don't know. And if parents don't know, then students don't know. And that means that you don't know who's sitting next to your son or daughter in a particular classroom at any given time. So keep that one in mind. Just another reason to pull anybody out, I would think. Okay. Jab-related things. I have two particular things I want to go through here. First, I want to go through a quick little Substack here written by Charles Wright, titled C's Newsletter is his Substack, Charles Wright, #1.substack.com. And he dives into Peter McCullough. And again, a subject I've been over before here on the show, but they connect some dots, certainly regarding his associations and then the amount of money that he's received from the pharmaceutical industry as he continues to push the variant lie and the pandemic lie and all of that. And then I have another piece of audio here that I want to round out this episode with from Dr. Mackis's Substack with a social worker describing her time during the quote-unquote COVID pandemic, which was neither COVID nor a pandemic. Okay, first of all, Charles Wright's Substack here. It was titled the following: Get Your Spike Proteins from Novavax, says Dr. Peter McCullough. Now, the thing that I like about Charles Wright is he goes after these people very well, much like Amazing Polly does. And he calls these people out, these individuals, these associations, these so-called companies in the so-called alternative media, like Vigilant Fox and whoever these other people are. And I just love the fact, again, that these individuals remain anonymous, like Vigilant Fox and Vigilant News Network. And, you know, where do these people come from? Who funds them? And why is it that they go from being a nobody to all of the sudden being a so-called somebody with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, if not more than that? It's not organic, ladies and gentlemen. It just isn't. So here's what they said. Charles Wright wrote the following, quote, "In this week in news that Vigilant Fox won't report, let's look at Dr. Peter McCullough's financial ties to the vaccine industry. Today, Vigilant Fox covered Dr. McCullough's report of just how much a typical doctor could make by poisoning their patients with COVID vaccines." And they wrote, again, the following, Dr. Peter McCullough reveals how much doctors were bribed to push COVID shots, blah, 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 blah. Then Charles Wright continues and says, as always, the anonymous press outlet Vigilant Fox, or Vigilant News Network, does not cover Dr. McCullough's own shady and pervasive ties to the pharmaceutical poisoning industry. Dr. McCullough has long been bribed to promote poisons himself. There is some speculation that Foster Coulson, founder of the wellness company, is funding Vigilant News Network and that Dr. McCullough is being paid by the wellness company. Well, we know that's happening. It says, I based this on several articles written by Sage's newsletter, but I can't say it's fact. The wellness company markets, quote, the medications you need for the next pandemic, unquote. Yeah. This again is why I don't like the wellness company and the people who promote them. It's perpetuating a lie. It's kicking a can down the road that needs to be destroyed. Charles Wright continued and said, let's take a look at a fact about COVID, quote unquote, vaccines and Dr. McCullough that you likely have not heard about. At the Novel Coronavirus Southwestern Intergovernmental Committee in Arizona, on Friday, March 15th of 2024, Dr. McCullough pimped for Novavax, despite all the terrible adverse events that we have seen from the COVID vaccines, quote unquote. These quote unquote COVID vaccines, such as Pfizer and Moderna, generate spike proteins with mRNA. The basis to generate the spike proteins is based on a fraudulent SARS-CoV-2 genetic sequence, which also has a poisonous spike protein, quote unquote, inserted into the sequence, nanotechnology. It says the reality is that the only way to get the spike proteins into the body is with injections. He wrote, there's a catch though. Instead of generating spike proteins with mRNA, Novavax included 5 micrograms of spike proteins as a quote unquote pure antigen or molecules. Who needs mRNA when you can just inject raw spike protein, argues the pharma shill. And then they have their entire transcript right here as to what they said. Apparently, Dr. McCullough said the following, quote, there's a third vaccine on the market you never hear about. It's called Novavax. It's a limited amount of the spike protein. It's 5 micrograms of the spike protein in pure antigen. We know a lot less about that vaccine. And our FDA and CDC virtually never, he emphasized, mentioned Novavax as an option. And what we've discovered, actually Senator Rand Paul discovered this, is that Pfizer, Moderna are using the same marketing firm called Weber Shandwick. And Weber Shandwick has an installed marketing unit in the CDC vaccine office in Atlanta. He said, in fact, the CDC is paying Weber Shandwick to do marketing for Pfizer and Moderna under the auspices of the CDC and HHS. Senator Rand Paul called out publicly this widespread corruption and conflict of interest. So even among the vaccines, our agencies are favoring the messenger RNA vaccines very intentionally through marketing. Then Charles wrote, how unfair is that? You could be poisoned by another form of spike proteins instead of the mRNA spike proteins. Pfizer and Moderna have an unfair poisoning advantage over Novavax due to an embed of their marketing firm in the CDC. Oh, the hypocrisy. I wonder if McCullough is paid by Novavax. He says, let's take a look at McCullough's history of receiving bribes. Let's just take a look at 1 year. 2017. That should be enough to make the point. The data is from openpaymentsdatacms.gov, quote, an official website of the United States government, it says, unquote. Data is available from 2016 to 2022 if you want to go through it all. He took over $1.2 million in bribes in 2016. It says general payments, $279,168.14 over the course of 364 payments. Research payments, not applicable. Associated research funding, $324,623.43 across 86 payments. And then it says ownership and investment interest not applicable. Let's see. So he says here later on, he just wants to hit some of the high spots regarding the companies that ultimately paid McCullough. It says top companies making general payments to Dr. Peter McCullough in 2017 are as follows. Number 1, Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals, Inc. Number 2, Amgen, Inc. Number 3, Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc. Number 4, Merck Sharp and Dome, LLC. Number 5, NX Stage Medical, Inc. Number 6, Novartis Pharmaceuticals Corporation. Number 7, Lilly USC, LLC. Number 8, Curix Biopharmaceuticals, Inc. Number 9, GE Healthcare. And number 10, Sanofi Aventis US, LLC. And of those companies, Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals makes the most money, or gives out the most money, whatever it is. Let's see. It says these payments are broken down into categories: compensation for services other than consulting, including serving as faculty or as a speaker at the venue other than continuing education program, a consulting fee, travel and lodging, food and beverage, and then education. Yikes. It says, now let's view the associated research funding. Associated research funding is where, quote, a physician is named a principal investigator in the database. Whatever that means, he says. Number 1, AstraZeneca. Number 2, AbbVie, Inc. Number 3, Merck Sharp and Dome, LLC. Number 4, Amgen, Inc. Number 5, Boehringer Ingelheim International, GmbH. Number 6, GE Healthcare. Number 7, Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceutical Incorporated and Company, something. And number 8, Pfizer Incorporated. There you go. Charles Wright wraps this up here and says, it won't take more time. I won't take more time, rather, to report McCullough's pimping for other pharmaceutical poisons such as Paxlovid. Quote, if COVID, Paxlovid, Pfizer, or Tamiflu, bird flu, Gilead, and whatever other poisons that he has pimped throughout his career of professional pharma pimping. He said McCullough's promotion of Novavax-branded spike proteins is particularly egregious in my estimation. I thought I would bring that fact to your attention, as Vigilant News Network is sure as hell not going to do fair and balanced reporting. All things considered, McCullough's report of $250,000 in potential revenue for doctors who would poison their patients for money sounds more like an advertisement than a criticism to me. He said, how do you think the average MD will respond? They will say that their industry needs to clean up their act, or will they say, hot damn, $250,000, exclamation point. No kidding. They will probably do whatever McCullough has done throughout his career, take the money, unquote. Yeah, it's disgusting. Again, the very emotional reaction that Peter McCullough has had in the past when you bring up the virus lie and the variant lie, he flips his shit. I mean, he loses his mind. He's instantly like, oh, that's not a debate to be even had. We don't need to be having that conversation. There's more conversations to be had. I stopped listening to him a long time ago when he started pushing the variant lie on Alex Jones's show. I thought to myself, you flippin' con artist. What are you doing? Well, look at this variant, Alex. Look at this line. See how this line on this thing looks different than this thing? It's a new variant. It's mutating. It's different. Shut up. No, it isn't. You have different symptoms in different people from the same poison, and you call it a variant of a virus that doesn't exist. Unbelievable. These people disgust me, but I like Charles Wright's Substack. He calls these pimps out, and I love it. Okay. I'm going to end with the audio here. Again, a social worker on the jab bus, the Children's Health Defense jab bus. This is from a perspective of a social worker and what they experienced. I'll catch you on Friday, everybody. Thanks for listening. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
All right, we are live. Can you tell us your name, please?
My name is Sol Ryu.
Your name is what?
Sol is my first name, and Ryu
Okay, so Ryu
is my last name, yes.
Okay, and tell us what you're a social worker during COVID. What does that mean?
Well, social workers do lots of things, but what my position was I was embedded in a primary care clinic, and I would get referrals from the doctors when they felt like people had emotional problems that needed to be addressed. So it could be mental illness, it could be people that were dealing with grief or stress or, things like that. And that was my job as a social worker there.
And so what happened? Talk to us tell us your story.
Well, one day we were told we couldn't see anybody because there was a pandemic going around. And so it was really a nightmare of information, mixed information. The head of our health department said, well, kids won't get this virus because it's similar to the cold and they have immunity. And then the next day they'd be saying, you can't see anybody except on telephone, or we had to switch to medical care and emotional care through telephone. And then finally we got the computer. And it wasn't for a while. It was several months later I started getting people coming into my office because they were very upset and stressed out. And one woman came in and she said since she got vaccinated, she had a migraine every single day, all day long. And she'd been back and forth to different doctors, and not a single doctor could give her anything that helped. All the things that helped with a regular migraine did not help her. And I said, wow, well, did you report the vaccine injury? Did your doctor? And my doctor said it has nothing to do with the vaccine, but it started the day after I got vaccinated, so I don't believe him. Then I had a woman come in who said that she had woke up one day, like a week after she got the vaccine. It was 3 days after she got the vaccine. She woke up and she couldn't breathe. So she went to the ER and they diagnosed her with a heart attack. And she was like, I didn't have a heart attack. I just woke up and I couldn't breathe. But apparently there's a number that they show that says you've had a heart attack. And since then I've heard that it means that the muscle of your heart has been damaged. So previously that's how they would diagnose a heart attack. Well, this showed, of course, 3 days after she got the vaccine, she had muscle damage in her heart. It didn't show she had a heart attack. It showed vaccine injury, right? And so I asked her, if she had said anything to the doctor about that. And she says, oh, yeah. I said, this must be, from the vaccine. And the doctor said, no, there's no relationship. And so this poor woman was going back and forth between the pulmonologist and the cardiologist. They were trying to figure out how to help her condition where she couldn't breathe. And they both kept referring her back to the other department because they couldn't find anything because it was a vaccine injury, right? And they weren't looking for that, or they were looking at traditional problems with hearts and lungs. And then another guy who had like a bypass surgery right after the vaccine, and somebody else who had a heart attack right after the vaccine. And they actually didn't connect it because they were told, I said, it's 3 days after your vaccine, Oh, there's no relation. My doctor told me there's no relation. So
it's extraordinary how people are so believing.
But also there were concerns. Number one, the pressure. I mean, I didn't want to get vaccinated. I had the year before I'd gotten vaccinated because they, in the hospitals, if you don't get vaccinated, then you have to mask. So I got a flu vaccine the year before, and my naturopath said, oh my God, your body's all toxic. We have to detox you. What have you been doing? And it was from the vaccine. So I wasn't going to get vaccinated, but they would literally come to my office. A nurse would come to my office. Oh, we have extra COVID vaccine serum or whatever they call it, and we noticed that you haven't been vaccinated. So how about right now? And this would be announced with everybody around, and it was so much pressure, and there was no confidentiality about who was vaccinated and who wasn't with the patients. In fact, the people at the front desk who were hired to answer the phones and make appointments were charged with going down the list of patients, and anybody who wasn't vaccinated, they were calling them and asking them to get vaccinated and trying to set up an appointment. So total breach of confidentiality and HIPAA. And when I mentioned this to my neighbor who is on the hospital, he's a commissioner for the hospital, he said, HIPAA during a pandemic? Are you crazy? So anyway, I was just,
So you took it.
yeah.
The Johnson
And
Johnson.
then I had adverse effects too.
So what happened after taking Johnson Johnson?
Oh my God. I woke up, it was Friday I got vaccinated, and Tuesday I woke up and I was like, what is the matter? I'm sick. I'm drugged. What's the matter? I can't think. I can't focus. I don't have any energy. And so, I called in sick that day, but it continued. I mean, I would go to work and I couldn't get through the day without laying down on the floor and taking a nap, and I still was exhausted, and I couldn't read my computer. My eyes couldn't focus, and I couldn't remember things. So, I'd have who I was supposed to see, on my computer. I would enlarge it, which was a real pain in the butt, and nobody would help me because, when I talked to my supervisor and other people about, since I've had the vaccine, I can't see, they didn't want to have that conversation. But anyway, when I finally figured out how to enlarge it with tech support, I could see who my patient was, but I couldn't remember from the time of reading it in my office to walking into the waiting room to say, who I was going to see. And then I couldn't remember when I brought them back to my office why they were there. So anyway, I had to retire because it was unethical for me to continue. But I mean, I also have my eyes stuff has not gotten better, and the exhaustion. I've been working what is it now, 2024. And this was in 2021. So for 3 years, I've been working with my doctor trying to figure out why I'm exhausted. And we've gone through all sorts of things. And it was discovered that I have supraventral tachycardia, which I also hear is being called POTS and is being related to long COVID. So obviously, it's a vaccine injury because they're both the same thing.
Are you done with vaccinations now and no more? Are we done?
Oh, absolutely no more.
Any pandemic, future one? Any scaremongering? Any job? You will not take a vaccine
Oh, no.
for any reason.
No, probably not. I mean, I was always hesitant. Like, I didn't take the my doctor said, "You want the pneumonia vaccine?" And I said, "Why?" "Well, it will stop you from getting pneumonia, and you're in your 70s and you're likely to get pneumonia." And I said, "Well, I've heard pneumonia is the angel of death to older people." And she says, "What?" And I said, "Well, if you're unhealthy and you get pneumonia and you die, it's because you're unhealthy. I mean, why would I want a vaccine to keep me alive, hooked up to a machine or something? If I'm unhealthy enough to die of pneumonia, then I should be dead." And then the shingles, they wanted me to take the shingles. I was like, I don't want the shingles. So no, I've never taken vaccines. But like I said, the hospital was pretty insistent. I mean, what actually happened was I woke up one morning and I felt kind of ill. So I called in sick. So mandated going down, getting tested to see if I had COVID. And that was when it took 3 days to get the results back. So I was sitting there for 3 days, quarantined, and said, oh my God, if this test comes back positive, because I knew lots of people were getting COVID around me, I will be the first person in this hospital that was a staff person and got COVID and went to work with COVID. And I would be on the front page of the newspaper. I'm in a small town. We have a staff person at the hospital who has COVID. And I would be the first one. And I said, oh my goodness. And everybody knows I'm unvaccinated. So that was when I said, okay, if I get COVID, I want to be at least able to say that I've been vaccinated, if I'm going to be the first.
Look at the consequences.
Yeah, I know. I wish now that I had found the support. That's what I was thinking. If I knew anybody else in the hospital who hadn't been vaccinated, I think I would have felt good about not getting vaccinated. But all I heard, like people in the, I started hanging out with a group in town called Health Freedom Information. And I got all this more information about how unsafe the vaccines were, once I had the vaccine injuries. And it was so upsetting because, I'd go into the staff lounge and somebody go, oh, I just got vaccinated, so I have a chip in me and and I can hear it telling me things that aren't true from the universe, all the things out there that we're concerned about, they would mock and make fun of. And one time I was really upset because this young girl came in. She was 13. And her teacher was asking the class how many people were going to get vaccinated because the vaccine was out for children. And she raised her hand and she goes, I am not getting vaccinated. Any company that puts asbestos and baby powder is not going to put anything in my body. And I was so proud of her. And I came out and I told one of my coworkers, and she goes, poor kid, probably her mother's listening to those conspiracy theories. And so there was no support. And this was after I had the vaccine injury and I was struggling. And this woman, my friend, knew anyway. It's just so upsetting to be telling people, I can't see, I don't have energy to make it through the day. I can't focus, I can't remember. And they're kind of like, no, I'm talking about something else, change the subject. Plus I had all sorts of body pain, body aches, and nausea and other things, but it didn't affect my job. It just was really uncomfortable. And
Well, thank you for telling us.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to this?
Well, that there's lots of doctors out there treating this stuff. And so there's hope that we're going to figure out how to heal ourselves for those of us that didn't know. Yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.